Boris Johnson has been coronated. But in his parliamentary constituency of Uxbridge, a young Muslim immigrant is already plotting to dethrone the king. If successful, Labour's candidate Ali Milani will make history. The first time a sitting Prime Minister has lost their seat in the House of Commons.
So, give us the tour then, mate.
All good for me.
Yeah. Flat screen.
Plenty of spot for me.
PS4?
Yeah, it's just for the PS4 and the Netflix. I'm not even hooked up to the TV.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody watches TV, like live TV.
No, I don't think people do. It's just sport.
The football and the sport is my only escape from politics and campaigning and things like that. So I try and get down to one of the local pubs or like the bars or the restaurants that show it. It allows me to kind of mingle with people in the constituency anyway.
Presumably you don't drink.
No,
as a Muslim, so going down to a pub, just to watch football, but with your mates, I suppose.
I would otherwise not usually go in at all.
Yeah.
But when it's for the football, it's usually it's fine. I'll have a Coke and everyone else will get smashed. I'll remember the game and no one else will.
Yeah. Got a couple of Malcolm X posters up there as well.
Yeah, 2 is a bit much. This one was a gift, so this one's more recently been put up, and then that one used to be up in my office when I was at Brunel. The Malcolm book was like the most influential thing I read at uni. This is my little, the prayer mat and the Qurans and stuff like that. This was a profile piece I recently did, and it annoyed me. Every journalism piece that we've done has been the same headline. Yeah. What I love about this piece, we've got age 55, 24, family, wealthy parents, father worked for the European Commission, and then family brought up by a single mother in Wembley. School, Eton, mine was St Augustine's High School in Kilburn. University, classics at Balliol College, Oxford. University, international politics at Brunel. Obviously I don't see my dad very often.
Yeah.
So that was when we saw each other, must have been after 4 or 5 years. Having only seen each other once in the previous 9 years.
Was that the last time you saw him?
That must have been 4 years ago, or 4 years ago. And I've seen him once since then. Yeah,
in Istanbul.
In Istanbul, which is where I got this, yeah.
Your student politics sort of led you towards being a part of the Labour Party?
I joined the Labour Party when I was at Brunel. And Brunel's actually just literally you can see it. Student politics was when I first kind of was thrust into any sort of campaigning, and that's where I picked up most of the chops of campaigning. This is my favourite photo. So that's my very, very first campaign to run for president. It was a real outsider campaign at the time.
And you won.
Yeah, I've got the video of me winning, I'll show you later. That's my favourite of so no one expected me to win. The only thing that'll beat that is beating Boris.
How often do you go leafleting then?
I try and go once a week.
Yeah.
We're kind of bumping.
We'll get you next to the Red Rose.
Oh yes. That'll be a good campaign photo. Get the quick shot.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Take a still.
People ask me what the campaign strategy is. The campaign strategy is talking to more people than anyone else will.
Yeah.
And because people really appreciate that level of proximity, and it helps that I live 2 minutes down, so I can just walk up and knock down. And I know people in the area.
Boris Johnson, when he was Foreign Secretary, would have had a stately home, etc. But even his home is Islington.
Yeah.
It is not Uxbridge.
He's got no connection to this area. Yeah, I lived on campus, then I lived off campus, then I lived on campus again, and then I came off. Because I did 2 years as president as well.
Yes.
I lived on campus when I was the president of the SU. I was the first one that became a VP of NUS or any full-time position on NUS. This is the current president, Ranjit. Ali.
Hello, Ali. I'm the new Ali.
Yeah.
I used to be in here.
Okay, sure. Oh, he hasn't got the key anymore.
No, I went for the better.
That's humbling. I was down there.
Yeah.
Me and Mike, who were the vice president of student activities at the time, shared this offer. Yeah, so that was the very first flat I moved in.
Yeah.
The bedrooms back there.
Your first halls at Brunel.
Yeah, Maria Gray Hall, if I remember correctly.
Okay, and did you have aspirations to be the SU president? Was that where you plotted your path to power?
Mate,
from that room up there?
That year it was make it through first year.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, this church is where the big hustings happens. So when the election kicks off and we go into full campaign mode, this will be where me and Boris have to go.
Do you think he'll turn up?
This one he does. He has to, because this is the big one. And then the fig tree, that's where we watch all the football.
Okay.
Sometimes they put the stuff outside.
I think we've got a selection here, haven't you? Metropolitan.
Yeah, and then there's the Queen's Head and the 3 Tons on the right. So after CLP meetings, the 3 Tons is the go-to place.
On Fridays, Milani plays 8-a-side football with a group of friends. We met up for a chat before kick-off.
Tell me about your journey as an infant from...
Infant?
Yeah, from Iran
Yeah,
to
so we
here.
came when I was 5. So I don't actually remember much from Iran.
Surprising
Well,
that.
Do you know what, man? I think I remember, but you never know if you're remembering like stories your mum told you and you're making that up,
Yeah.
those memories, or whether it's real. But yeah, we came across when I was 5, me, my mum and my sister. So my mum didn't speak a word of English, which I think is actually, a lot of families do that, man. And I can't imagine myself like picking up and moving to like Portugal. Although everyone speaks English in Portugal, but you know what I'm saying. I can remember going to school, like not speaking English, kind of feeling a little bit isolated. The communities we lived in were all lived in the same world, so it wasn't abnormal. Most families were immigrants, either first or second generation. Most lived in council houses like we did. Most suffered in like relative poverty or struggled with bills and things like that. So we didn't really know that like a different world existed until way after.
Where do you think people start to see, at what point in the process, where do we start to develop these prejudices? Where do we start to people?
It can be quite early. Like I was at a school recently and I get invited now just because I'm like one of the youngest candidates. I think like the mean average of like people running for politics is like 84 or some shit like that. But I went to the school and I heard these kids like, I don't know, 11, 12, shouting Brexit means Brexit.
Right.
And I just heard it and I was like, well, you're obviously not
They're
talking about...
piss-taking though,
Yeah,
surely.
I mean, you're not talking about the customs union.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not an 11-year-old going, I don't want to be in the single market. It's... You take things are manifesting themselves through common languages. So I think it's usually like an angst that people have and it's an easy answer. And this is like my biggest thing right now in politics is, and the thing that annoys me the most is, most of these people have a genuine economic angst, right? They're working 2 jobs, they can't make bills, you know, they see other people going on holiday, they can't go on holiday, and they're just struggling. And there are some folks that are coming around and providing easy answers to that angst. And then they're picking that up and then the language is seeping through to the kids, usually around 10, 11, 12, I think. Because kids much younger, they don't care, like, they don't even see it. Do you know what I mean? Unless their parents start to instill it in them. And even then, they don't see the rationale behind it. But what's happening is, like, some of the easy solutions to the very real angst is seeping through. And a lot of that is the failure of the rest of us and not providing answers to those problems. In my school, like, we had every ethnicity, every race, and beyond like banter, which was inappropriate and we didn't understand at the time, there was no malice in terms of race. The racism we felt was later on and institutional.
People think that with that influx, Corbyn secured the leadership, influx of more left-wing voices, and that from that often unwavering solidarity with the Palestinian people can then stray into anti-Semitism, and people attribute the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party now with Jeremy Corbyn's rise to the leadership.
I would never want to tell Jewish voices what anti-Semitism is or where it comes
Yeah,
from.
of course.
And it is certainly true because I have been myself personally guilty of it, where your discussions around Palestine veer into anti-Semitism, which is well documented, and I've both apologised and taken action on it. That's certainly true. But, so I'll speak about someone who's personally experienced more racism than most in politics, in terms of Islamophobia specifically. These things are institutional in our society. They don't exist in one place only. I was lucky enough to go on to Auschwitz, Birkenau concentration camps with the Holocaust Memorial Trust. As one of those, you know, because after what happened, I didn't want to just apologize, I wanted to learn more. And those kind of programs are amazing because it teaches people, you know, it starts with one thing and that's how racism fosters. And I said this at an event recently, Islamophobia. There are mosques being burnt right now. There are people being killed in this country for being Muslim. I was there at Finsbury Park after the man got run over, right? These things start with us allowing that level of racism to penetrate the dinner room table. or they start with headlines like 1 in 5 British Muslims sympathise with jihadis, which was in a major newspaper in the UK. It was a headline of a major newspaper in the UK. And we have to tackle them in a societal sense that way. And that's what I'd want to see Labour do.
Got you. Let's talk about I want to talk about the journey you've been on, but to make it explicit for people who don't understand, one of the things that you said was that Israel doesn't have a right to exist.
Yeah.
Presumably you don't think that anymore.
No, yeah.
But how do you go from saying that
Yeah.
to being an anti-racism campaigner and actually changing your position and learning from that mistake that you made?
How it goes was, so when that happened, I think that tweet was around the war in Gaza, where I'd lost a friend in Gaza, and it was anger. It was an anger at the injustice that was being faced towards the people and not understanding the political nuance of what was going on there. So I think that what happens is I didn't have a huge amount of engagement with Jewish colleagues who could explain to me the significance of the comments, which I am very, very lucky to have now. A lot of good friends who have reached out since that I rely on to help, because no one knows the communities better than the voices themselves.
Yeah.
The journey that I would go on for me, was about, actually what happened with those comments was I was really, really keen. And again, all of it comes from the fact that I have experienced a lot of racism myself. All of it came from, okay, I now need to take it's not enough to apologize, I need to take positive steps to learn. And that doesn't need to compromise to this day, the burning injustice I feel to what happens to Palestinians. People have been very, very kind to me in accepting my openness and humility. And like every interview I do, people ask me whether I'm okay to talk about it, and I'm perfectly happy if I can be part of the solution in the conversations. But like, a lot of it comes from an emotional place in experiencing racism myself. Like, I get death threats to this day. I've got to speak to the Met Police, I spoke to them today, about threats that come through our door or through social media all the time. So I often get asked, is Labour doing enough to tackle racism? It's never doing enough until we get it out of all society. And it's a very personal journey for me.
You are, in more ways than one, diametrically opposed to Boris Johnson.
Like, in so many ways. And I think that's what took off. That's what people were excited about. They were like, he's a young candidate, and this is like political elite. I come from a very working class background. He has been chiseled for PM like from a very, very young age, and has his ambition has always been to number 10. Ours was kind of, can we feed ourselves? The Muslim thing, being a Muslim, and quite open about that, and some of his comments, being an immigrant and some of his comments, being Iranian and the stuff with Nazanin that came out. So you couldn't have built a bigger picture. And so for me, it was kind of like, my perspective on it was, if we can, I'm standing not because I'm Muslim, not because I'm immigrant, but because I think our voices, like the traditional politics isn't working anymore. The same old people aren't going to provide us the solutions. I think it needs people like me to shake things up. But if we can present an image, and diametrically opposite visions and pathways for the country, and win that argument, both nationally and locally, that's a great thing. Look, man, like, part of the reason why I decided to stand was we continuously got punched in the face, me as a generation and my family, but it's not about me, everybody did. Like, we were the first generation that had tuition fees trebled, we had our maintenance grants taken away, we had our EMA taken away, which we used to get, I was the first generation of universal credit, our benefit systems got slashed, my mum lost her house, and then you would watch politics, like the political world, and it'd be the same old shit, like the same people talking as if who have never experienced the lives that most of us here have experienced. And so that's why I got involved in politics, not to run to be an MP, but because I felt that distance. And I remember going home after the tuition fees, the student demos.
Yeah, I was there.
Feeling really empowered and going, there's so many people out on the street, there is no way that they're gonna go through with it. And then they went through with it, and just feeling hopeless, man, and not wanting to feel like that. And I was lucky, I made it to uni. So I changed my course to politics after that and was like, fuck this. And decided to get involved, and things kind of snowballed. It was never a plan.
Let's talk about winning that election then, because if you win and you unseat Boris, that will be the first time an MP has unseated a Prime Minister ever?
Yeah, sitting Prime Minister.
Sitting Prime Minister.
In 1906, and I'm saying this for all those ats on Twitter for when I tweet. In 1906, a Prime Minister got unseated, but he wasn't a sitting Prime Minister.
Right.
So for every single one of those bots atting me, I'm perfectly aware that it's a sitting Prime Minister. I have zero intentions on being a traditional politician. I'm not interested in it. My main thing is, can I stay myself? Can I make sure that I don't go into that suit and tie, like what people expect me to be, and just be me? Because it's difficult. I find myself sometimes doing it now, even now, right?
You have to wear a tie in the Commons, won't you?
Is that a rule?
I believe so.
Fuck that. Is that an actual rule?
I think so, yeah.
I might have to stand down. I hate ties. My leaflets, so I've got a leaflet in the back of the car. I'm wearing a red tie in my leaflet. I can't stand it.
I bet.
It was right at the beginning of the campaign where I was
So you're doing all the press, you're getting moved around, do this, do that.
And really, at the beginning, I was really pressured into acting traditional and not myself. And I would watch interviews or read interviews and go, that's not me. And you can tell that's one of the biggest things on my mind is how do I just stay like Ali and not become like a traditional politician. We make an effort to talk to people who can't vote, to 16 and 17 year olds.
Yeah.
And I constantly get told by more senior people in politics, why are you focusing your time on them? They can't vote. So that's, and I understand the politics of that, but I also need those guys to get more involved.
Why do we care about education?
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised at what shit advice I've gotten.
Yeah.
Like, what was the other one? I got one quite early on by quite a senior politician, not a Labour Party politician though, who said to me, well, why don't you go get a real job so you can get some real life experience for a while and then come back to politics? And it took everything in me. If he'd asked me that question now, I probably would reply this way. At the time, I was still getting used to it. But I was like, my life experience in my little finger is more than your Etonian Oxford, upbringing. Like, I remember my mum, and having to pick between paying the electricity or the gas meter. You know how you have the plug-in stuff?
Top up cards, yeah.
Yeah, top-up cards. And she could only afford to pay up one, right? And she would pick electricity because that way we wouldn't notice. Because when the gas is not on, it's a lot harder to notice than when the TV's not turning on. Like, you want to talk to me about life experience?
So tell me then about the campaign, because it's quite a complex electoral picture now, isn't there? Particularly, we're getting away from a traditional two-party system. It actually looks like we might end up in a multi-party system, rise of the Brexit Party, Lib Dems are resurgent.
Yeah.
So that's the Lib Dems, that...
The Lib Dems, yeah.
What do you think of the Lib... Okay, first of all, what do you think of the Lib Dems?
There's very few parties I have as little respect for as the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats ruined my life. We have to remember, I expect this of the Tories, but they call themselves Liberals and they tripled my tuition fees. They were the arm of austerity in that they injected it. They could have stopped it and they didn't. So I can't take moral lessons from Liberal Democrats. I'm sorry, I just don't. You tell me night follows day, I'll have it independently checked out. Do you know what I mean? Because, do you know what? And part of it is very emotional, which you can tell by my response to it. When that campaign happened in 2010?
27.
I believed him, man, and he almost swept me up. So it's like probably like a girlfriend that breaks up with you. Do you know what I mean? Like you just can't run on one thing and then do exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's not just me. I'm fairly sure my
no.
generation won't forgive the Lib Dems. So maybe they should go away for a little while and sit on the naughty step for a while and think about what they did before they come with all these moral lessons. It doesn't get picked up in the national conversation in our campaign as much, but being a local resident is the most important thing, because people know I use the same hospitals they do. If I was to break my leg, maybe not at football later, but if I was to break my leg at home or if I was to fall sick, I'd be going to Hillingdon Hospital, which is the same hospital everyone else goes to. I studied at Brunel, which was the university in the constituency. The common joke I tell residents is if you dropped Boris off at the end of their road, he wouldn't be able to find his way home.
As a man of Iranian heritage, what's your assessment of what's happening right now between Britain and Iran in the Strait of Hormuz? It looks like things could actually escalate in the region.
Yeah.
Are the concerns that people have about a hostile Iran legitimate?
Look, the concerns of anyone becoming a nuclear state are legitimate. I don't want to see a single more nuclear state. In fact, the denuclearization of states is of utmost importance. And I know there was a big conversation around this when Jeremy first got elected, and things have kind of moved on. It's moved off the top agenda. But the fact that bombs exist that can murder millions of people within seconds is unbelievable and just illogical. They shouldn't exist. And so providing a nuclear weapon to any state, let alone a state in that region that sometimes acts in the way that it does, is of concern. But also, Iran negotiated a deal in which it curbed its nuclear activity. It was Trump that took them over. And this politics of aggression and ego and might doesn't work. And I don't think it works. And actually, I think pulling out the nuclear deal was a huge mistake, the Iran deal. So I would say the concern is justified insofar as I don't want to see nuclear Iran, but that's not because of Iran. That's because I don't want to see any more nuclear states. I want to see denuclearization. Denuclearization, that's a tough one.
Do you think it's illogical though? Because
from an Iranian perspective,
global perspective, from a mutually assured destruction perspective, since those 2 bombs were dropped on Japan, we have not seen a war of the global scale that we saw 2 of in the space of 3 decades. Since that happened, there has not been a conflict like that. As grim and as brutal and as horrifying as the use of those 2 weapons were, we have not seen global conflict on the same scale.
Yeah, but students of history will know how close did we come in the Cuban Missile Crisis. We came so close, and
Khrushchev blinked though.
Yes, but what if he hadn't? And so for me, the possibility, because we haven't until it happens. And then once it happens, look, we have enough conventional weapons to wreck ourselves, to not need, hydrogen bombs. So, in the same way that a lot of the mainstream conversations and a lot of the political perspectives that are now mainstream that weren't 5 years ago have penetrated the mainstream, I think we can win this one as well. Because climate change, 5 years ago to now, how far has the conversation come? And people 5 years ago were saying, well, it's not conceivable that we'll be able to we'll have a carbon-free economy by 20-something, right? Or even domestically, conversations about nationalization. If we would have that 5 years ago, it would have been a ludicrous thing. But so I think we can move the conversation on this, because when you present it to people like, there are weapons in hands of people like Donald Trump that can wipe out cities.
Civilizations.
I'm not comfortable with Donald Trump and Boris Johnson having enough nuclear weapons to knock the Earth off its axis.
Comfortable.
There's something to scare the fucking daylights out of you. So we did the...
There are the leaflets.
Yeah.
Show us the Thai one then.
Mate.
Here's the picture.
Mate. I'm sorry for all the people watching.
You've had some experience of... You've had knives pulled on you and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where do you think we're going wrong? How do you think we could do better to tackle it?
So look, the entire conversation on knife crime is wrong. The solution to knife crime, cheers man. The solution to knife crime is not a policing issue. Like when I was growing up, so many of us considered picking up a knife, not just for safety, but because that was the culture. But most of it comes from the fact that, like, all the youth centres have been shut down, the job opportunities aren't there for a lot of young people. They already have all these economic problems, all these social problems. And the knife element is the symptom of a wider problem. Like, I had knives pulled on me on the regular. Like, me and my friends even like considered picking them up at points.
There's routes that society has deemed acceptable for young black men to excel at.
Yes.
One of them sport,
One of them sport, yeah.
and the other is music.
Yeah. But even that music they're uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
Like, I remember Stormzy early on was getting shit for promoting violence.
Well, that was it. LBC. He rapped about it, didn't he? LBC trying to blackball me, trying to blame me for knife crime.
Yeah. He's also got the right line on Boris. I won't repeat it.
Well, his line on Boris is "fuck Boris."
Like, I'll watch on TV people who have never experienced it, never in their life experienced the actual realities of knife crime on the streets growing up, talking as experts, as if they have any clue why a kid, and they demonize people, not knowing what some of us had to go through, and then fucking Boris coming out with stop and search is the answer, as if there isn't already, as if not everybody knows that there's an institutional racism in the police that's been, it's not me saying, by the way, it's been independently looked into, but that also stop and search harbours and fosters more mistrust between these communities and the police, which is not what you need.
Labour want to portray Milani as the opposite of the new Prime Minister. Local, Muslim, working class. And it seems increasingly possible that this young man, not 20 years off the boat from Iran, could put Boris Johnson out of office.
This is the best part of my week, bro.
Yeah.
Also, I'm going to lose mad votes today, by the way. People seeing me in a United shirt.
Yeah, you will.
You have to say what you believe sometimes. This is like the perfect, because obviously doing the politics and the campaigning is full-time, super stressful. You get a lot of shit, but you get a lot of good stuff. This is the only time in the week when you just don't even think about Brexit or anything. Yeah, you just worry about whether you're going to get the points.
Exercise is really important for mental health.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did a lot of work at NUS about this, like how you're so much more likely to have a better mental health if you're doing some level of exercise throughout the week. I don't know everyone here, but a lot of the people that come, I used to go to school with, so like it gives us a chance to keep in touch. You remember the World Cup and how in like the most toxic political space, the whole country came together for the World Cup, both the women's and the men's.
Yeah.
It's the only time in recent years where I've like remembered the country coming together.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we were talking about knife crime and youth centres and stuff like that. Like, the football that we had as kids was a lifesaver in that most of us didn't have a whole lot to go home to. Like, we didn't have the PlayStations or a whole lot of like stuff to do when we got home.
Yeah.
So you either stayed out and like got involved in shit that you shouldn't get involved in, or you had the football teams and stuff like that who just put on training sessions and put on like five-a-side games and gave us something to do. So it's like, it's really good for people's health, mental health, for the country, but it's also like, it gives a lot of the kids something to do. What's really good about it is, when you come, because most of the people that I play football with aren't involved in politics. So like, occasionally in the warm-up bits or before or after, we'll have a chat about what's going on as a joke, and it gives you a real sense as to like what people in the country are actually thinking. Because those of us in the bubble think everybody's thinking what we do, and everybody cares about what we care about. But it gives me like a real good insight into
normal people.
Yeah. As much as I like to think it, not all of them vote Labour.